Watch the first part of that. Everybody else, they can watch and laugh. Okay, well, let's have a word of prayer before we get started tonight. Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to be able to gather tonight and to look at your word, and specifically the message from Solomon in Ecclesiastes about life on this earth and how we can put it into a proper perspective. And learn from his wisdom and all of his life experience so that we don't have to keep making the same mistakes. Help us to put our priorities in the right place so that we don't spin our wheels and kind of head down the wrong path in our life, that we continue to fear you and listen to your word and your commandments and follow them and walk in them, practice them. Help us, Father, to learn the lessons and gain the wisdom from these writings tonight, and help us to encourage and edify each other. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen. So like I said last week, we're not going to rehash the whole first 4 chapters of the book of Ecclesiastes, but I probably will just kind of review the first 7 verses which we ended with last week. But I do want to ask some general questions about the book from you. And so I want you guys to answer. Most of us here looking around have actually read and studied this book before. What do you think, without just rehashing what Solomon will tell us in chapter 12, that the end of the matter is to fear God and keep his commandments? That's not an appropriate answer to my question. What do you think the main point is that you take away from this book?
Things in the world aren't going to give us the satisfaction of the things that we think.
Okay. I don't know if you turned the overhead mics on. Yes, no? Okay. So just for people who might be watching, Ben had said that, the things of the world are just not going to give us the satisfaction that we often want. And when we look and try to do things and try to accomplish things, that everything will ultimately leave us feeling like, is that all? So, okay, appreciate that. Anybody else? Yeah, Mark.
One of the things that I'm guilty of is having to experience things firsthand to learn my lesson. I'm the guy who needs to learn to benefit from others' experiences. So the author's point is, I've done all this so you don't have to.
Right. Yeah, and so like Mark said, he's the author of this book is trying to get us to realize, to be wise and not have to make all the same mistakes he made. We don't want to have to go and do all these things, different things, and find out that, wow, they don't really fulfill us. So we want to learn from his mistakes rather than try and duplicate them ourselves. But you make me think about when you talked about being somebody who tends to want to make your own mistakes and kind of figure it out yourself. I've been that myself, and I've seen that in others. And I remember having a conversation with a young guy one time who kind of said that as well to me. But he was saying it not like, wow, I should really try to change that. He was saying that's who I am and that's what I'm going to do. Well, and I was telling him, this was a Christian, and I was telling him, though, that the scriptures actually are teaching you to not do that. That's not real wisdom. Real wisdom is not you having every experience and learning all the mistakes. Real wisdom is listening to advisors, listening to God, listening to other people. That's real wisdom. Real wisdom seeks out, people's advice, wise people's advice, and gets there. Proverbs talk about it a ton, about getting good and wise counsel, right? That's how we get strong. And having to say, no, I'm going to make every mistake myself, I'm going to do it my own way, and it always makes me think of Frank Sinatra's My Way, which I know was my father's favorite song. And it's a lot of people love the song because, they're going to do it their way, and they're going to take the lumps. But that's not real wisdom. That's life experience, sure. But that's kind of like reinventing the wheel every time. And that's not really the things we as Christians should be striving for. So you're going to learn, you're going to have plenty of them without trying to. You're going to get lots of experience making that mistake without having to try to, like, no, I know they told me you shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, see for myself. Like, that's not the way to go. Okay, anybody else? Big picture of the book of Ecclesiastes. Yeah.
I don't know if I can say this right, but I would usually walk away thinking that the point is, as far as under the sun is concerned, just enjoy the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Debbie said just kind of, enjoy the process of living. Today I was thinking back to, I actually wrote a paper on the book of Ecclesiastes in college for a class I had specifically on this book. And I do remember part of what I wrote, and I was thinking a little bit about it, and part of my conclusion, and really coming at it with somebody who read the book with essentially no Bible knowledge. But I came away way back when, how many years ago, but I was like 18 or 19 at the time, and I thought that there was still purpose in striving. That he's not telling us in the book that even though everything is striving after wind, which sounds like on its surface, well, that's pointless to strive after wind. But that my takeaway when I was 19 years old was there's still some purpose in striving. And even though I really didn't know what I was talking about back then, I actually, for the first time, started seeing maybe a little bit of insight that I had that I think now. And that is, he gives us all this, it's all empty, it's all worthless, right? All this conversation on a regular basis. Everything's empty, everything's pointless, everything's worthless. And yet, there is benefit in working. What he calls busy work in some places. There is benefit and there is gifts of God that come from all of this striving. And even though the things of this world are not going to ultimately fulfill us, there are some things all through the process that God has given us to enjoy. And so if we have them in the right perspective, if we can take life realizing that yes, we have to work with our hands, we have to provide for ourselves, help others, take all these other passages of Scripture into mind and say those are all good, but those are not the end all be all of life. Those are not going to be the great accomplishment. The great accomplishment is that you feared God and you listened to Him and you walked with Him. And along the way, you're going to do a lot of that, working and striving and busy work, and you're going to have ups and you're going to have downs. And you're going to go through all the process. And in that process, I think some people describe living as sometimes you have to stop and smell the roses, right? That in many ways that's kind of what the book is. When you take the whole thing and you go, oh wow, here's all this negativity. And sometimes people who are really feeling real negative and feeling really depressed and down, this book resonates. They recognize these feelings of this is pointless, this is worthless. People find themselves in these places emotionally a lot, and they recognize the book. But the book isn't about this is pointless, this is worthless. The book is about we've been given a life here on this earth which is temporary. It's going to be fairly short. And actually, I look at it now. Actually, earlier this afternoon, I was thinking. I've been thinking about some lessons. And one of my lessons I've been planning is what would my last words be? If I only had a chance to say a few words, I'm just like a sentence or two, what would they be? What would be, of everything I've learned, what would be, I would say, the most important things I could tell somebody who was younger. So that's one thing I've been thinking about. And one of the things I thought was, this goes by way faster than you expect. Now, I know when you're young, it doesn't seem like life goes by very fast. but man, does it speed up. And it goes by a whole lot faster than we expect. And so with that short life that we have on this earth, which is this temporary thing, that we have to really understand the process, I think. Know that it's going to have its ups, know that it's going to have its downs, know that it's going to have its defeats, know that it's going to have its victories. But what are the things that are most important that give me the foundation that allow me to get through all of that? You know, when you ride a roller coaster, what is it? It's like, I hope I'm strapped in really tight, right? That bar better come down, better not let me get out of here. Because you're like, okay, this thing is going to whip me around, go all over the place, but the wheels on the track, and the track better not break, and my seat better not break. And then if all that's true, I can enjoy the ride. But if I was on a roller coaster and I didn't have any of those things, and I didn't trust any of that, which is sometimes looking at some of those fair rides, you'd be like, oh, wow, that would be a little scary. And God's kind of helping us understand the tethering points, the things that see us through. I think that's why his end conclusion is really going to be the cornerstone of that. But okay, any other thoughts about kind of the main concept of the book? Okay. So in the first part of, let me get over to my right slide. In the first part of chapter 5, talk about fearing God. And I made the point last week, in just kind of reviewing, that this is one of those lessons that we really, especially to help our children with as parents, and that is helping people keep their word. In this passage it is, if you're going to the house of God and you vow something, meaning you said you would do something for God or you would give something to God, you better do it. Because God doesn't put up with you saying that, vowing things and not giving it. That's not acceptable to God. He's not happy with that. He says it'd be much better off, don't make a vow. That's better than making a vow and don't do it. Because one of the mistakes that we often make is we want to do good, right? We want to do something positive, so we want to help out, and we want to kind of try to do something. We're going to vow this, but then we can't do all of it. Well, the mistake sometimes when we're young that we make a lot is we overcommit ourselves and find that we can't do it all, and then we have to apologize, or but there's a consequence to that. What's the consequence of when we're young and we say we'll do things, or we make a vow, or whether to God or to somebody else? And making a vow is just simply, from God's perspective, what is a vow, by the way? Saying you'll do it. Yes is yes, no is no. You say you'll do something. You vowed before God. And what is the consequence of not keeping our word? Right? So yeah, people don't trust you. You say something like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they'll do that or not. They said they will, but I can't really do that. It does. But it makes us exactly the opposite of Boaz in the book of Ruth, right? When Naomi heard that, when Ruth said, oh yeah, Boaz said he would take care of it today, and Ruth said, oh yeah, or Naomi said, Ruth told Naomi, Boaz said that, and when Naomi heard that, she said, oh yeah, it'll be done. Because that was the person he was. Now, was that the person he would have been at 18 or 20? Probably not. But he was an older man. I mean, running a fairly large, household, and a farmer and all that, But when he would do something, and he gave you, I'll get it done, he would get it done that day. And that was the character that he had, and that had obviously been proven. And when we're young, we make those mistakes, and almost every young person makes those mistakes. But ultimately, we have to overcome. Those have to be overcome. Because now, let's say you just one time said you would do something to somebody, and then you didn't do it. Well, how many more times of you saying you would do something before they fully trusted you again? 12? Wow, you're really tough grader. It's quite a few, though. I don't know at what point. If you did 10 in a row to me, it'd probably be good. 5, I might even go on feeling pretty good about you. But it takes a lot to overcome one. It's just like business. Businesses know, typically, if they have one really bad review, it takes like 10 to overcome one bad review in business. And so, and it's probably pretty similar, that, undoing those mistakes. And so being able to, keep your word, keep your vow, don't be rash with your mouth. Sometimes we desire to help, that's good, but you have to not only have the desire to do it, you have to know that you can do it. This actually reminds me a little bit of what Jesus talks about in Luke 14, where he says, to become his disciple, you not only, what do you have to do? When he says you have to count the costs. What are you doing in counting the costs to be his disciple?
Give up family and friends, really everything.
Yeah. You've got to consider, what do I have to do in order to do that? So you talk about counting the cost. Because what he said is, in order to finish, do you have enough to finish? And so he says, to be his disciple, you really have to think about it. It's not just like, oh yeah, I would like that. No, it's, can you do this? Can you do what I asked you to do? Can you hate your mother? Can you hate your father? Can you hate your siblings? And not when it's easy to do those things. Can you do some of the things he's asked you to do that are hard? And can you do it forever? Counting the costs. And so that's kind of I think that's what it reminds me of, kind of just knowing when you, don't being rash with your mouth, saying giving your word, saying a vow, but thinking about it, can I do that before saying you'll do it? Right? Okay. Any other thoughts at all about that? Any of you young people who this book is especially directed at? Do you learn anything from some of what he has said here? Really? Those eyes said a lot.
Nothing matters.
That's not what your eyes told me. Nothing matters. No? Oh, yeah. I don't think that's what this section said, though. Okay.
Everything matters.
Keeping your word matters. Having your yes be yes and your no be no, it matters. So, okay. So in the next section, rest of the book here, going to look at the vanity of wealth and the poverty. We're going to talk about some being poor as well. But the first section of this, I think, might really be applicable to present time. But I think it's applicable to any time. But I think we especially see it right now because of all of the kind of chaos within our governing bodies that are kind of going on, and who's ultimately responsible or not responsible. So let me just kind of read the first couple of verses here. He says, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. First off, especially verse 9, there's a reason it's hard to understand, because translators have a hard time translating the Hebrew. And so different translations actually translate, especially verse 9, quite differently. But we're going to kind of go with the ESV's version for tonight of it, which is pretty similar. I think the NIV has it as well. But first off, in verse 8, so the oppression of the poor happens, and there's a violation of justice and righteousness. He says, don't be amazed. Should we be amazed and shocked that, wow, the poor person was oppressed? Well, who oppressed them? Because what's interesting here in verse 8, well, what do you think, verse 8? Who is the oppressor here in verse 8?
You can have some sort of power to oppress somebody.
Okay. True, you do have to have some power to oppress somebody. Yeah. But can some people oppress people and still say, well, not my fault? It's part of what this verse is talking about, which these couple of verses are fairly hard to kind of piece together sometimes. You read them and you kind of, what? You kind of think you get it, but it's like, wow, that's really kind of confusing verses in a lot of ways. But you do have to, so you're talking about high officials and justice, but how many people here have had to call into a company because of a problem with that company, and yet you're calling, customer service, and you really just can't get any help from the people you talk to? Is that common? Now, is it the fact that you can't get any help, is it the fault of the person you get on the phone? Whose fault is it? Let's just say a company. I'm just going to pick not because because they generally do a pretty good job with it, but if you were to call Disney, because you had some, like, especially in the last few months, people have had all their plans canceled by Disney, right? People have been calling in, and for a while there, nobody could get into them and things. So I saw a lot of complaining online and things. And so you finally get a hold of somebody, and that person can't really help you, and just say, I'm sorry, you're going to kind of lose your vacation, and yeah, we can't, give you another one right now, and we can't make it all right, and we can't fix it all. Probably give you your money back at some point, but because right now they're kind of week at a time canceling people's reservations without really calling them. They just get canceled by their system a week at a time going forward. And now you get a hold of somebody. Is it that person's fault? Can they do anything? Now the problem is they can't help you, can they? Because they have an official over them, don't they? That's usually the person we're asking for. Can I talk to your manager, like the level 2 customer service person? And then, but they can only help so much, right? Because they have rules. They can only do so much. Maybe a little more than the first person you got hold. But in the whole hierarchy of Disney, who's ultimately responsible? Huh?
The Chinese.
In Shanghai, for sure, because they are the primary owner of Shanghai Disney, not Disneyland, not Disney. It's the only property of theirs that they are not the major shareholder of. But so Bob Iger took back control. There really is nobody until you get to the top. But can anybody call him? No. So some of what he's talking about, I think, is bureaucracy. There's a certain kind of oppression that happens in bureaucracy. How many people do you see go to, say, the courthouse or City Hall, and you're trying to get a permit, or you're trying, and you're talking to people, and you're just like you're banging your head against a brick wall. They can't help you. They send you someplace else. They can't help you. Nobody can help you. But see, everybody you talk to, nobody's fault, right? Because none of them are responsible. In fact, as I was reading this again today and thinking about it, it made me think of the movie White Christmas. That's weird, right? Why did it make me think of White Christmas? The song that Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby sing about passing the buck, being in the Army. There was always somebody higher up to pass the buck. Because that's what bureaucracy is. Nobody's typically responsible in bureaucracies. And it's very hard to sometimes nail down who was responsible, right? recently, it was like, I don't know if you've been following much on the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice wants to like drop, after kind of ruining Michael Flynn's life for the last 4 years, they're not we're just going to drop the case now. Now the judge is like, I'm not sure I want to let you drop the case. But they're like, well, somebody outed this guy, from some leak, and maybe it wasn't legal, but who did it? Well, I don't know, it's somebody in bureaucracy. Well, who could it have been? Maybe, I don't know, did anybody break the law? I don't know. See, that's what bureaucracy gives you, doesn't it? Bureaucracy gives everybody cover that is within it. And, that kind of thing. But in a lot of that bureaucracy comes oppression of the poor. Because why are the poor more oppressed in bureaucracy?
Well, they never get justice. They just take the runaround from every single person and get it within heaven.
Yeah.
With satisfaction.
Yeah, they can't get satisfaction, just keep getting run around. But why would a poor person have more oppression by that than, say, a rich person?
People run out of resources.
Yeah, they don't have resources. Okay, money. They don't have money to do two things I can specifically think of. They can't hire good lawyers. They don't have any money to go hire a good lawyer to start fighting for them, and they don't have enough money to influence politicians to go down through bureaucracy and tell people what to do for them. That's what rich people get, right? Why do so many people give so much money to political, campaigns? They expect influence at some point. Now, the person might completely agree with them, and they're on the same page, and they're like, yeah, the thing I want to do, you want to do for me, so I'm glad I want to support you because I want to do what you're going to help me when you're in that position to do the things I want to do. And that's how money does. Money has power. Poor people don't have that power. Poor people find themselves, banging their head against the bureaucracy all the time. But the bureaucracy's thing is, and it's like, can you ever actually sue somebody in the bureaucracy and have it be their fault? No. Can't sue government. You can't sue it's hard to sue big companies even. So that's kind of what he's talking about here, though, that the oppression that happens, and there's this bureaucracy. There's a high official watched by a higher official, and yet higher ones over them. And the bureaucracy itself creates oppression. Now, it's very possible he's talking about there is a high official here who is an oppressor, and he's got people above him protecting him, too. That's also possible. Because that also happens in bureaucracies too, doesn't it? You get cover. But the last verse 9 is, but this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. Like, what? How does that apply to the idea of bureaucracy and being kind of an oppressor of poor people? And anybody have any kind of guesses at this? It's a weird one, right?
It kind of sounds like everyone puts their pants on like the time and state. That we all have to eat, and even the king eats from the same field that the gleaner or the poor person does. I'm not sure that that's the takeaway.
I think that's a good thought. I think about that. Yeah, we all do kind of from that, because everybody is even kings kind of become a little bit. They kind of have to listen to their bureaucracy. Can king just decide to ignore all of his army? Not for very long and still live. And so he's kind of a cog in the bureaucracy too, and he can't completely buck it, or he is going to get, the bureaucracy itself will attack. Actually, I think I actually told some people that I thought Trump would have a big problem in governing, because he came in as such an outsider with no political experience, and the whole bureaucracy didn't really like him. Nobody on any side. How is he going to accomplish much? Now, he accomplished more than I actually thought he would do, but I think he had almost the whole bureaucracy fighting him, because he's still pretty limited in his power, isn't he? You think he's the most powerful person on earth, but he's still got a big bureaucracy under him who doesn't have to listen to him, because their unions can tell them they can't get fired. And so That's just the way bureaucracy works. And the kings sometimes are susceptible to that. But I think he's telling us also here, there is a gain in this. What's the gain? Is there a benefit to bureaucracy? Well, first off, let's ask the reverse question. What is no bureaucracy at all? There's actually a book of the Bible it should make you think of. I think you just whispered it. Judges. Because what is the statement in the book of Judges? Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Everybody just kind of, everybody just does whatever. Is that better? Would you rather be a poor person in that kind of society? Or would you rather be one that has bureaucracy, that has a king, that has armies, that has cultivated fields? Because if nobody's helping anybody, it's really easy for your neighbor just to come and take your field, or ruin your field, or do whatever. There is some, I think he's telling us here, that there is some benefit to structure. As maddening as structure and bureaucracy can be, there is some benefit to it. It allows us to have all these cultivated fields that even feed the king. He eats from those things as well. So I think, and that's kind of what Ecclesiastes does. Ecclesiastes tells us, oh, here's some bad stuff, but here's kind of the better parts of things. And the reality is there's some benefit to having a government, isn't there? There's some benefit to having some structure, to having some authorities, right? No. Okay, any other thoughts on those couple of verses? They're a couple of strange verses, I think. Ecclesiastes has a number of them. I thought these are two of the strangest, but... Okay, continuing on, he says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. What's the difference between money, wealth, and income?
Well, you could own $1 million home, and that's wealth. But if you don't have any income, you can't buy food to feed in it or power it.
Okay, yeah. So which of the three is this? And I've actually had these two bills in my wallet for weeks. Because nobody wants to use it anymore. I don't even want to use it anymore. I Lysoled this at home when I received it. I didn't, actually. I thought about it, but I didn't do it. Yeah, gotta launder our money now. So money, right? You know what money is. And then their money would have probably been silver, copper or gold in some way. But we know what money is. But you can have money and not have wealth, right? You can also have wealth and not have money. You just talk about somebody who has a lot of property and no actual cash. This is actually what happens to a lot of people when they first buy a home. Very first home that people buy. Who can tell me in the real estate world, what do they call that? Yeah, house poor, right? Nice, big, beautiful house. You bought more, it's like, okay, I'm just starting off my career, so I'm buying as much house as I can buy. And you're just putting everything towards it, and you have nothing to go do anything with. You got a nice place to live, maybe you can't even furnish it yet. Which, by the way, is why all those furnishing stores were saying, hey, buy your furnishing now, and you won't have to pay for 5 years. Yeah, you'll have $10,000 of debt sitting there for 5 years, but... And so you have wealth, which is just the value of stuff, a net worth. And then income. So there are people who have a lot of wealth have income. And the reason they have income is because they have money sitting in a bank and they have money sitting in bonds and they get paid some income. But you can actually be really wealthy and lose money in a year. In spite of all your income, you could have far less than zero income. Right? This year alone, how many multimillionaires and billionaires will net make money? this year? Probably not many. Their net worth's probably going to be down. I don't know, I'm guessing by the end of the year they may not have fully recovered from the 25% losses that many of them seem. Now, one hedge fund guy in February bet $4 million on a hedge bet that made him $2.6 billion, if I remember right. He bet that the pandemic was going to crash our stocks, and he kind of bet $4 million on it and made billions of dollars on it. So he's going to do well this year, and whoever's in his hedge fund. But most people, even really wealthy people, are going to lose money this year. They'll have probably no real income. So they're all different things, and what he's saying is all of those things, when you love those things, they won't satisfy you. All of them can go away very easily. Hasn't that actually been demonstrated here recently? Can't all of this go away just like that? It's like in February, could we have imagined some of the people who've lost jobs, who don't have a job, and it's like, oh, it felt like everybody could get a job anywhere they wanted because jobs were everywhere, and people hiring were like, there's not enough workers. And now it's like there are people who would like jobs who can't get jobs because there aren't enough jobs. And just like that, one thing happens and then it can go away. Wealth can do that too. Lots of people can lose their wealth in very short order. Money, all these things, they are all they have the sense of they are just air. Okay? He says, when goods increase, they increase who eat them. So here's the thing about becoming rich even. And so he gives some downsides to it. When goods increase, so talking about if you get wealthy and you have a lot of money, you'll have a lot more people to feed. There tend to be more and more people around people with money. In fact, I just saw some football player who was drafted in the first round, a few weeks ago, who posted something on Twitter saying, I haven't received any money yet. Because he's almost certainly be getting hit up by his third cousin twice removed on his mother's side already. Because he's going to get millions of dollars this year. Most of us won't see that in 10 or 20 years. But he's going to get that this year, at 22, whatever he is. And he's going to have lots and lots of family that he didn't know before. Because that's what happens. It draws people. And so you have to ultimately protect yourself from all the people that get coming at you. He says, and what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? So you got a big pile of money. Say, wow, the pile's gotten bigger. Nice. It's like, what's the advantage of actually all those gold coins? A friend of mine, when his father passed away, or maybe it was his uncle, I was helping him a little bit, and his mother was trying to handle his estate. I think it must have been his uncle's estate. And they went to his bank and got into his deposit box. And he had oodles and oodles of gold coins sitting in there. And the value of the gold coins, they apparently were rare gold coins. So they were worth a lot more than the actual gold. They were worth a lot more that was stamped on the coins. There were just tons of them. And they didn't even know how long they'd been sitting in there. What did those gold coins actually do to the guy? They ultimately did nothing, right? Now he probably gave him peace of mind. But a lot of rich people worry more about their money than they actually have peace of mind anyway. But he says, sweet is the sleep of a laborer. Somebody who actually works sleeps a little more sweet than sometimes people who just have a lot of stuff coming to them, who don't actually work, don't do anything. Has anybody actually found during the kind of shutdown where you're kind of all just shut in your house, couldn't go anywhere, and maybe you weren't doing anything, that you actually slept worse? Yep. Now, it could be just anxiety because of what was going on, but it also might have been actually no physical activity. The rhythms of life, being physical and being physically active is helpful to actually the rhythms of life. So even if you have money, it's good to work. It's good to be laboring in some way, in some fashion. And by labor, he doesn't mean you have to be laboring with your hands. It can be laboring with your mind. It can be laboring with, almost any way. But whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. Heartburn at night. That's what it makes me think of. I don't know if that's what he intended. That's what it makes me think of. Okay, so he says, there is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. And those riches were lost in a bad venture. So he keeps his riches, he hoards them up. That first part of it reminds me of the story Jesus tells of the rich man and Lazarus, when the rich man was hoarding up. And then he's like, he dies, and what was the advantage of hoarding up all that money? It really had no advantage for you, did it? Some people actually, by hoarding, actually hurt themselves. In fact, just think about the concept of hoarding, not money. But anybody here watch the show Hoarders? I haven't seen it in a while. I don't know if it's still on. It's been probably a couple of years or more since I saw an episode of the Hoarders. It's really kind of disturbing, isn't it? Now, I grew up in a house a little of that, it's why I'm the opposite of it, by the way. I don't like a bunch of stuff sitting around, because I kind of grew up in a house with a lot. My mom certainly had those tendencies. Didn't quite get there like any things I've seen on TV, but she certainly, if she had kind of been left to herself for a long enough time with enough money, could have gotten there. But it's the same thing. Does hoarding whatever somebody hoards help their life? Do those shows, is anybody ever better for having hoarded all the things they hoarded? No. Nobody, not a single person. And even if it's money, it doesn't help you to simply pile up stuff. It usually works to your hurt, because you're not actively using the things and gifts that you have. You are simply trying to bring them all in and absorb them all and keep them all to yourself. That's not going to help you in life. So then he says, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. One, you kind of bet on that, or you put your money there, and there it went. It's all gone. Lots and lots of really rich people cease to be really rich people. I don't know if you're aware of that. But I mean, not just a few. Most, especially those who become rich without kind of suddenly, and were not taught how to handle riches and handle money well, lose it. Most of them do. I mean, like 50%, 50+%. And it's whether you get millions and millions from some athlete or some movie star, or somebody hits a lottery, majority of those people end up broke from bad ventures. So he says, and he is a father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. He came from his mother's womb. He shall go again naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. What gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Now this last line in verse 6, so he came. So when we come into the world, what do we have when we are born? I don't know, a lot of gook on us, a lot of gunk that people try to clean up quickly. We come in our birthday suit and nothing else, right? And how do we leave? Now, this in Hebrew, I've read that this is very much emphasized in Hebrew, that you leave exactly the way you come in. You have nothing. In fact, a lot of people who when they pass away, you know, especially if they pass away at a hospital or something, are they wearing a lot of clothes? We cover them, right? Well, they're not wearing a lot of clothes. We kind of go out without much on either. Because, you know, but we come in and we go out exactly the same. And so the issue is, what are you going to do between those two things? With all the things that come your way, what are you going to do with them? That's what he's really kind of reminding us to do. Don't fall into the trap of hoarding stuff. It won't work out for you. Moreover, in verse 17, all his days he eats in darkness in much vexation and sickness and anger. Now, that last verse always makes me think of my uncle, who I consider one of the most miserable people I've known in my life. And I don't just mean miserable from, boy, being around him made me miserable. He, I think, was actually quite miserable. I don't think his life had much joy in it. I don't think it had much love in it. He was a very rich guy. So he died with, he didn't go broke. He was shrewd with his money. He was manipulative with his money. His money was a tool for him to manipulate people who worked for him and others. And he died pretty alone. My mom was about one of the few family that still visited him. But my mom was like the baby in the family that he had always taken care of. So he and my mom had kind of had a special relationship. But you know, I'm like, wow, he had everything, and he seemed like the most miserable person. And I thought that before I became a Christian. About a year before I became a Christian, I had the opportunity to actually go to work for him. And I'm like, spent a couple weeks with him in Minnesota. They're like, yeah, there's no way. That's not happening. And, you know, so I know this. I've seen it. I've seen it in my family. Wealthy people that I've known who don't have joy, who have a lot of sickness, a lot of anger, a lot of sorrow, vexation, grief. You know, because do you think it's really fun to have to manipulate people with money, and they don't do it because they love you? What would encourage you more? The fact that you were able to twist people around and manipulate people with your money, or the fact that people loved you and cared enough for you and come and do something for you? Right? Yeah. We would all be like, yeah, well, that's not even hard to choose, is it? But people who don't have love, and they use those things sometimes. And it happens to rich people, you know, more often than we probably know. Okay. Any thoughts on any of that part of it? Because then we're going to come to the last, that dab but.
I'll keep it brief because we don't have a lot of time. I'm curious about verse 16 from your perspective, because the writer says, this is also a grievous evil,
Mm-hmm.
or a severe evil.
Yeah.
Is it this person's perspective that is terrible that we don't get to keep everything we've amassed in this life to take with us? Because it's clearly God's plan.
Yeah.
That we come in with nothing,
Right.
we leave with nothing. Why is it an evil?
Well, he said this a number of times, because in this part of it, he is talking in terms of life under the sun. I do all this stuff, I accumulate all these things, I got all this stuff, and then I go out and I don't have any, I've got none of it, or I blew it all, which he said, this, and kind of think what he's saying from kind of a human experience, just looking at that experience alone and not thinking about God's gifts or anything like that, and not thinking that there's something after. He's saying, wow, none of us get to keep anything we accumulate. We don't get to like store it up, and we don't get eternal, awards, on our wall. It's like we kind of go out like we came, and it's like, this is horrible. This is awful. And I think he's expressing what a lot of people. I think you see this in worldly people a lot. Well, I think what he's expressing, what a lot of worldly people think, is that it just feels like life is kind of unfair, and no matter how good you do at it, it's like you still lose in the end. And I think he's kind of expressing that from a worldly perspective and view. I think it's how he's describing it.
I was wondering if maybe the perspective was, it is a form of evil that we are preoccupied with, that we can't take it all with us.
Mhm.
So don't dwell on that.
Right. Yeah. No. I think he's trying to express it the way kind of a worldly person would think of it, because I think that's actually what he's doing throughout the book. He's kind of giving the worldly perspective, and then he kind of brings us back to God. Gives us some worldly perspective, brings us back to God. He's almost in the book going back and forth. And think about it. He's actually doing this over and over again. He is repeating himself conceptually. There's a lot of, the concepts that start in the first chapter continue all through the book. And so he's kind of teaching us through some repetition here. That when you look at life under the sun, it will seem very unfair, and it'll seem all very pointless. But when you bring God into it, now we get a little different perspective. And that's the part of the book I think is really trying to get us to see the gift of God here in the last couple verses, the last 3 verses, 18 through 20. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting. So that was a great evil, right? But here's what is good. Here's what's really fitting, just the perfect thing. He says, it is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil. Remember, I said this earlier. He actually is repeating himself from an earlier chapter, I think in chapter 3, where he says, finding the good in your toil. That's what the enjoyment here kind of really is referring to, the idea of finding the good in your work. He says, it's good. That's what's really good. That's when you know. You ever go out to the store and you look for clothes, and you see something and you go, wow, I love that. It's like, but they only have like one of them. You try it. I think it might be able to fit. You put it on, dressing room. You're like, man, that stinks. And another time, you find something. You're like, oh, it fits perfect. And then you want to wear it all the time. That's what's good and fitting. You got to wear this all the time. And he says, find the good in your work. Find the good in whatever work you have. Whether it's cleaning your room or cleaning your toilets. And he says, with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life, and now he's emphasizing there the real temporary days of living, the few days of our life that God has given him, for this is his lot. This is the portion that has been given to us. Each of us have been given a portion. And he says, you know what? You need to just enjoy and smell the roses with the portion you have. This brings us back to the idea, I think, the idea of contentment. And just kind of, here's what I've got. Find the good, find the joy, find the godliness, and enjoy. Don't try to avoid envy and seeking after money. And enjoy what you have. And he says, everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the joy in his heart. He says, if we're occupied with the joy and the good things that everything brings along our way, if we can find the good in life, and the moments of joy, and the good things, he says, that's really the best that we can do in this world. That's where the blessings of God really are. Which is kind of in some ways telling us, like he has told us earlier in the book, we are busy with a lot of busy work. There's a lot of work that we're going to do that somebody else is going to come and redo. You're going to get your house just perfect. and think this is as good as it ever gets. And then maybe at some point you pass away, you leave it to another family member, or they sell it and they goes, tear all that stuff out. I gotta redo all that. It's all going to be redone. Everything we do, somebody else is going to redo. So, just enjoy your trip. You know, try to enjoy the travel between here and there. It's almost, in many ways, I think what he's trying to get us to do, it's a little bit like you're going to go on a vacation with a couple little kids, and you're going to maybe fly, you're going to maybe drive a bunch, you're going to have all these hours of travel, and they're going to keep asking, when am I going to get there, when am I going to get there? And what you have to try and do is tell little kids how to enjoy themselves on the trip, right? We used to do, when we first got VHS tapes in our van, when Janae was real little, we would tell her, this is like a 4 Disney movie trip. So pick your 4 Disney movies you want to watch. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy, because we're all sojourners, right? We're all traveling from here to eternity. So try to enjoy the trip that we take. No, I think that's what he's telling us, that is really the best gift that we will ever really have in this life. No. Okay, I didn't really ask somebody ahead of time. Somebody would grab a song to sing just to close out in a second here. We're going to stop streaming, though, in a second, but I think what we'll do maybe is I'll probably, we'll stop the stream, and then maybe all of us can just sing. But let me have a closing prayer, and then we'll have a song just to kind of close out our evening together. So, our dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful to be able to study. We're thankful for your word and for the words of Solomon written for us that we might learn from them. Help us, Father, to really receive the gift, to enjoy the days of our life, to enjoy the breath and the work and the moments and just being able to eat with one another and to be with one another, and we look forward to that even more and more into the present circumstances. But help us, Father, to remember these things and just to enjoy each day as it comes. Find the good in each day that we have. We pray these things in your Son's name. You grab one, Ben? Okay. So in just a second, Ben is going to come up then and lead. You go ahead and shut it off already? We're going to watch. Okay, you can leave it on for Ben singing if you want. So everybody, Ben will sing to you at home from the microphone and perform for all of you. But for the rest of us, we will sing together here in the building. But once he has decided his song. And please, if you haven't already seen my email, and I'm pretty sure I already know about all of you guys anyway, but those out there that might be watching and listening, I'm talking to you, send me an email that you're going to be here in the next few weeks, and I'll make sure we have seating for you. And we do have some more new coming, so looking forward to seeing some of the people who haven't been in the last couple of weeks, and seeing few new faces in here. So we will be, just to kind of give you a quick announcement, we will be, I explained a little bit in the email, we're going to be grouping people who are already kind of getting together. We're going to start grouping them even closer. So there might not be just one family, there might be a couple families sitting together that are already, regularly together. And so we're going to start kind of clustering people who already get together all the time to make room for others to join us. So, okay, we're going to end there. 52 in our supplements, so let's go ahead and sing that. You can all stand.
Closing prayer after this, or be done after this?
We can be done after this. I kind of did a closing prayer.
Jesus, draw me